All right, guys, thanks for coming in. I'm going to jump right into this, and I think, we'll obviously get more into the nitty gritty of stuff. But today we obviously want to talk about an important subject that I think, especially that we're coming from, we're on a construction industry podcast, and I think our industry is probably looking at mental health as probably a little bit of a taboo. I would say traditionally, blue collared, hard nosed men being in, on job sites and stuff like that would not resonate with people thinking about the first people that would be like, open, vulnerable, and, talking about their feelings and all that. So I think that's an important place to start, where we can be kind of a beacon of light of that conversation around mental health, but also being here with your organization, with Atlantic Wellness, which has now already started to impact disadvantaged youth in our area. If I'm not mistaken, 12 to 20-year-olds.
12 to 21.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say we start there. I give us a little bit of because I can't expect everyone to know already about Atlantic Wellness, but I'm sure you guys would be really excited to let people know what your organization is all about.
We would be excited to do
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Thanks for chatting with us today,
Yeah,
too.
yeah, no problem.
We appreciate the opportunity. So Atlantic Wellness is a nonprofit. We provide free mental health counseling to youth ages 12 to 21. So we have a number of different mental health services that we offer, but the primary one is one-on-one counseling. So we have a team of licensed counseling therapists who work here to make sure that when young people need support, if they're struggling with anxiety or depression or any number of different mental health related issues, that they have the support when they need it. And so we've created our model to make sure that if a barrier exists that might prevent somebody from accessing that support, we eliminate that barrier. So everything we do is free to young people.
Nice.
There's no cost, thanks to great community partners who provide support to us. We're able to provide those services free of charge. Last year we provided over 4,500 hours of
No
free
way.
services to young people in the community, and that's only because of the community partners that we have.
Sure.
But the other advantage to our model is that if you were to access services through your insurance, your insurance is going to cap out after a few sessions.
Right.
With us, we don't have any cap. So you could start at age 12 and theoretically go until age 21.
Okay.
So it really allows the team of therapists that we have to really build those connections. It's relationship-based counseling that we provide. We have an amazing team that are so phenomenal at building connections with young people, and so it really allows youth the opportunity to get comfortable with the therapist and to be able to open up as much as they're wanting to do.
Yeah. Now I'm gonna just jump right into maybe opening up the conversation, and I am not afraid to share from a personal standpoint, and you guys can decide however you want to share your personal experiences. But I think we've all obviously been kids at one point, and I think that I was talking to Andrew a little bit about this on beforehand, and I think I only more recently started thinking about my mental health, in my mid-30s is probably, and listen, I don't think that it's ever too late to start. I think that looking back, I'm like, all those people that maybe said get your head out of your ass, maybe were right and I should have listened, right? But I think it's never too late to start looking at you've got your physical health, and you've got you need a job, you need a roof over your head. Those are things that are really important, but we often overlook what's inside, right? And my journey is probably much different, I think, than where we traditionally think of people suffering from mental health. I will not sugarcoat it. I didn't have a difficult upbringing. I was physically active, played sports, I did well in school and stuff. I was a problem child, I would say. I really class clown and stuff like that, which got me into trouble quite a bit. But I think I only realized more recently than often the biggest struggle for me was that I was so difficult on myself. And I think that that's something that everybody goes through, and I don't know the struggles that people go through where there's maybe even more to it. But I think if I can just express that, even someone like me that may not resemble, and I don't know if resemble is even the right word, but I would say everybody can be susceptible to those issues, right?
Yeah.
So, it's important to think about, when you come from a perspective of where I'm coming from is I was often maybe ignorant of needing help. And also on the other end was more so like, I maybe didn't think I needed help, right? And I think that comes from like, being in sports and stuff like that. And like, I think being a male is also a big cause for having that mentality, I guess. You kind of put it aside, I guess. But, the trail of consequences that you leave behind is still there, right?
Yes.
And so sometimes I look back and I think where the whole head out of your ass part comes out of is like, sometimes I look back and I'm like, I wish I could, and obviously the first part is to forgive yourself. But I often look back at, the people along the road, which I wish I could apologize back to, but where the journey really started even in the mid-30s, that it's like, the only thing that I can do now is get better going forward. And that's with, going to therapy and stuff like that, which is finally got into it. And I remember when, you have the first conversation with your therapist and she's like, I'm kind of surprised you've gotten this far without doing this. And I'm like, okay, all right. Well, so yeah, that's like, it's all that to say, it's like, it can affect anyone. I think mental health is not so much about the negative side of it, but it's also kind of like a muscle, right? It's like you need to train yourself to cope with things better, to tolerate things better, to, not fall into the trap of reacting emotionally and maybe being more logical about things and not so much like, kind of fight or flight all the time, right? So hopefully that kind of resonates maybe with someone, especially I don't know how many youth will ever watch this podcast, and hopefully we get to a certain level where they do, but I know and I can see myself as a younger 14, 15-year-old, and I can remember that there are still people like that, and hopefully they'll kind of see that as like, oh, maybe I do have something that I want to talk about, right? And maybe I don't need to be as afraid as I thought I was at the time, or that there wasn't really any need of doing it, right? So
I think we have a better understanding now that everyone has mental health. Not everyone suffers from mental illness, right? So everyone is susceptible to having poor mental health or needing to work on their mental health. So again, the stigma has changed around mental health a lot from, early 30s, quite a ways from where I was, but it's changed quite a bit and the stigma has been reduced. However, that's kind of changed the lens a little bit in mental health, in that because the stigma has been reduced, now we have a lot more people accessing services and a lot more people talking. And then we have a lot more people, learning from TikTok about what mental health is and what mental illness is, right? So again, it's as much as it's great that people are reaching out and talking more about their mental health, then there's the other side of it too, of like more people reaching out and maybe not necessarily having issues or concerns, but then feeling like they do, right? So the pendulum swings. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yes. Thank you, TikTok, for sure.
Now,
for sure.
And I guess I don't want to interrupt you on that thought, but do you see more harm in the rise in popularity of those TikTok? And I see them.
Yeah.
I just can't tell you whether they're actual doctor, if they actually have recognition. I can't tell.
That's the thing. You can't tell. So can youth tell? Right. So that's another piece of it. Again, there's good and bad that comes with that, because the youth will come in and be like, I've been seeing this, this, and this on TikTok, and these are strategies I learned on TikTok. And it's like, great, awesome. We've been talking about that for 2 years in sessions, and now there's someone on TikTok presenting it, and that's awesome. They got it in like a 2-minute quick flash. That's how youth learn, and it's perfect. It's visual, it's stimulating, and it's more than the hour session that we might have had and then they left and they forgot what they've learned in session, right? So there's some real benefits to it, and it brings really good discussions in sessions when they come in and talk about what they've learned. But at the same time, they'll come in and be like, it's the same with physicians. When you go to the physician and you say, I have all these symptoms, and they're like, you were on Google, Dr. Google, right? Now it's the same thing. We're seeing that now in therapy sessions, is that, oh, you've been on TikTok.
Right.
Who are you following on TikTok? Let's look at your TikTok. Let's look at the ones that you've been saving. And we have lots of great conversations about that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of, I guess, on the side of your organization, do you see an opportunity there in using those platforms to maybe push some of that messaging out? Or is it more like, hey, listen, we're aware that it's there and we're okay with that. However, it's just a great topic to have in the sessions?
I think we need to be on TikTok.
We've been saying that.
We've been saying it for a
There you
long
go.
time.
Yeah.
It's not going to be me. It's going to be one of the younger therapists on the
It's not going to
team.
be any of the
The
three
three
of
of
us
us
that
have no
are on
business being on TikTok, let's be honest. I've done a couple with my daughter, and they were humiliating.
Nice.
So, yeah, they stay on her private account. Yeah, no need to share those.
Right in the draft.
yeah. So, but yeah, I think it's something that we've talked about and are looking at. We have an admin person that is more youthful than the rest of us. She's more familiar with those social platforms, and I think there's room for it. And I think we can definitely reach a lot, maybe even just like local youth. But for sure.
I think that's consistent with the approach our organization has taken from the beginning, though, is meeting young people where they're at.
Yeah.
So we have that flexibility as a nonprofit organization, and the whole model that we created, and Danielle and Julie have been with the organization since the beginning, to be able to adapt what we do to meet the young people according to the needs that they have. And so it's kind of one of the benefits to an organization like ours that we can do that. We still don't know how to use TikTok, but
No.
Instagram, we're all right.
Well,
We can chat after this.
The kids always tell me Facebook is for soccer moms. I'm like, that's fine, because I'm a soccer
It
mom.
has,
I'm cool
we
for
look
that.
at, the analytics, and we're like, you know, I
Yeah.
remember when I first, I started I'm going on 5 years with the Elma Group, and I remember coming in, and it was like, you know, they did a lot of traditional stuff, radio, print, all of that. And we started talking, I was like, well, you have to do everything digital. And I was like, well, you can't forget it. And I was showing them the data, and I'm like, literally the people that are on this are the people that you think are in the newspaper and the radio and all that. So I'm like, you don't need to trust the guy that's just coming in, but I'm just telling you. And here we are now, where it's like, you know, they've given us the ability to do a podcast. We're on all the social media platforms. We've got a lot of flexibility with that. So to any organization, I would say they're just means to an end, and really they're communication tools. So if you're an organization that has a message, use it to your ability, right? And to your point as well, it's put out a message that's real, authentic, and truthful.
Right.
Because you don't want to end up doing it in a way where it's like, the means to an end is like, you know, selling a course or being a snake oil salesman, right? It's like it can get a little bit tricky, especially in a subject like mental health. Right?
For sure. Yeah.
Now, any other personal experience? I feel I put myself on the spot so much.
I think we all have.
Yeah,
Lots of
I
personal
wouldn't be
experience.
here if I hadn't had the experiences that I did as a youth. And I think probably for most of us is that idea, again, and I've heard it from the team too, of like, how can we show up as adults, the adults that we needed when we were growing up, right? And having that access. You know, when I was a kid, going to counseling wasn't really a thing. And guidance at school, again, was more, career focused.
Okay.
And not necessarily emotional support. And back then we didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
We didn't really talk about it. It wasn't anything that that you even talked about with your friends, really. It wasn't a thing.
I know.
It really wasn't. And now,
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, I grew up hearing like, oh, well, she's shy.
Yeah.
She's just a shy, quiet girl. And
Yeah.
it seemed like it was a negative thing. Like
Right.
being shy is a negative thing. And I grew up feeling that way. And then it was only as an adult, and even after I started working with Atlantic Wellness, even though I knew like I had anxiety and that kind of thing, but I realized oh no, I'm just an introvert.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not shy. I'm just introverted. And then
And that's
talking
okay.
to these guys, it was like, what do you mean you don't like talking on the phone either? Or like we would draw straws on who had to order the pizza. And suddenly I
Right.
knew I was normal
Among us.
among us. Yeah.
That's a big thing too, is that I
huge.
think you often struggle within your mind thinking that you're the only one, and that scares you to have
Yeah.
that conversation, right?
And
Yeah.
you think that you're flawed somehow. And then you realize, oh, well, no, like I have an anxiety, and there are ways that you can deal with that. Or
Yeah.
being introverted isn't a negative thing. It's just different.
Yep.
It's,
Yeah.
we need both.
Yeah.
I think the more people share their experience too, the more we work on breaking that stigma around. Like, you don't have to be in a crisis to be accessing mental health support,
course,
right?
yeah.
Like, there's varying degrees. Like, I have a psychologist that I see as well, and right now I'm at a place where it's really more of a check-in for me on,
Okay.
you know what, like, here's what I'm going through right now. I need a little bit of support on learning a strategy on how to deal with, burnout or stress or something like that. But you could have somebody who's dealing with maybe addictions or substance abuse, or like there's so many different issues on that spectrum, and it doesn't have to be a really daunting thing to be seeking help. It can be really accessible for everybody. And so the more people share their experience, and the more people, and like you had said, like as a male speaking out, that's vital that men are talking about this more and breaking the stigma.
And it's funny,
around that.
I used to I remember vividly that when in my probably early teens, I communicated well with girls or women. I'm thinking girls. I had no trouble communicating with the opposite sex, and at one point something happened where that door closed, and then it turned me into all people are enemies to the conversations that I want to have. And I think that's where my association to the male stigma around it just went twicefold, right? And that's where when you close that door there, you bottle up so many things inside, and you're carrying this baggage around throughout, and listen, I probably did a pretty good job along the way of doing it, but at a certain point it's enough's enough, right? And there's always the problem is you sometimes don't realize the collateral, the damages that you do along the way, where listen, at the end of the day, the people that come into your life, once things like that happen, they also have a choice that they need to either leave or stay, and that can impact their trajectory in life. But you're also doing those damages, right? But it also starts from, you're doing that damage to yourself, and if you keep doing that over and over and over and over, that becomes a lot of things to fix, right? So
We all have a history, right? We all have
Yeah.
a story.
yeah.
And we're often just projecting human beings,
Yeah.
right? We're reacting and responding to other people's stories all of the time. Yeah. So, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh,
Okay.
How much have you found the struggles of youth have changed over let's say, and I'm not sure, how long have you been directly involved with youth, would you say?
In my career,
Yeah.
oof, that's going to date me. 20 plus years.
So let's say even in the past 10 years,
Yeah.
how much has changed, or can I know we don't want to talk too much about specifics, but
Yeah.
are there things that now have become more noticeable, or things that are changing? We obviously talked
Yeah.
about there's more self-diagnosis now,
Yeah.
which is can be a good and bad thing.
I think the overall general, or what we would think is more of that stereotypical, more generalized, anxiety, depression, communication, relationship kind of stuff, has always been the same. I would say 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when we started Atlantic Wellness to now, I'd say that stuff is the same. We're learning more and more about trauma and how trauma is impacting people. We all experience trauma at different levels. I think that we're seeing more and more of. More kind of, we would say, complicated cases or more layered cases, right? Just because we know more. and we understand more. We know how to ask better questions, how to build those relationships with youth to have a safe space for them to do that. Yeah.
We've seen a lot more. We were talking about this, I guess, in the staff meeting the last time. Kids these days have more access to world issues,
stressors,
stuff that when we were kids, I mean, I didn't read the newspaper. I didn't really watch the news very often, but now kids have it
on
all
TikTok.
in front of them. It's on TikTok. It's
Not
it's
fashion.
wherever. And so they're worrying about things that they didn't used to before, like
news.
finances and world war and poverty and hunger. And like, we didn't really think about that when we were kids.
One thing that really stood out to me when I started here at Atlantic Wellness and then over the years is that when we were younger, you couldn't wait to become an adult.
Right.
You couldn't wait. Like, it meant so much to kind of like, I can't wait to move out on my own and go do my own thing and have my own place, my own career. Yeah, we were just so excited. But that's it. Now things have completely shifted. We are working with kids that are terrified to become adults. Terrified. And you hear them saying, like, at 17, I don't want to pay taxes. I don't know how I'm going to pay my taxes. I don't know how I'm going to afford rent. I don't know how I'm going to get a job. How am I going to pay for university or go to college?
Kids that don't get their driver's licenses
kids
anymore.
That there's so many more kids now not getting driver's license, right? Not at, like, that's not something that they look forward to anymore. They're terrified.
Is it just they're scared of driving?
Yeah, it's a lens of way more independence and responsibility. The world just feels heavier.
Right. It kind of connects. It's like, okay, making that step means I'm getting closer to being an adult. And
right. It's much more daunting than it was exciting for us. It was freedom. Like, we're like, yes, can't wait to launch into adulthood.
Right.
Now they're like stunted, right? So much so that, like, when we chose 12 to 21 for our mandate, 21 was chosen because it was like that's the age that typically in research we would see that's when youth would launch into adulthood.
Okay.
Now they're moving the target to like 25.
Right.
I even heard the other day as much as 35 was still considered youth, young adult, right? You're still okay.
Cut, but you're good.
Yeah, I'm definitely way over that. But again, though, just still that idea that people are taking longer to move through that, right? And I think there's a lot of resistance there because it's fear-based.
Right.
Yeah.
And to your point, I would say, like, just the access to that negativity and the
why would you want
fear-mongering and all that is you're so much exposed to it over and over and over. And keep in mind, like, I part of our jobs as part of the responsibilities as in marketing team is to be on social media quite a bit, but I try to also just minimize my screen time so it'll alert me like, okay, you've hit your quota today. And I think, like, I'm being mindful of that. Thankfully, I was in that generation where from maybe like 16 on we started, or I think 16 was when Facebook first started. But before that is like we went outside and we scraped our knees and we played road hockey and stuff like that. But I think about, like, in that time, if I had like a smartphone or I had the computer or the stuff like that, that's a whole other ball game, right? So
yeah, so that's been they've seen the world through their screens forever, right? And we were talking about this earlier today, and parents have less boundaries around just their stressors and oversharing with kids, right? And kids hearing about parents' financial stressors right now and just kind of where the world has kind of where the economy is, right? So nobody wants to become an adult in that. So it's creating a lot of anxiety. Yeah, and we see that here in our offices.
Have you started seeing, like, I don't know if this is, I mean, do you start seeing a wider variety of people with youth accessing it? Like, you're talking about, like, there's obviously more people coming, but do you find, like, I'm sure you can kind of categorize the kids in a certain way. Like, you can kind of tell, oh, maybe this is a popular kid, or maybe this is a kid that has like the parents are well off and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Is it they're
all walks of life?
Yeah. Yeah. And do you find that all youth are kind of going through the same struggles, or is it like
there's more similarities among youth than there are differences in what they struggle with? for sure. If you like bring it back down to the core of what's going on for them, for sure.
Yeah. And it's like you said about yourself when you were growing up, you can't tell by looking at someone and thinking, oh, well, they have issues or they don't have issues, because people put so much pressure on themselves. Like it's a lot of times the straight A students, they're burning out or they're overwhelmed or they're, placing too much pressure on themselves. Yeah.
A lot of masking. We'll get a lot of youth masking. Everybody puts on a face, right?
Adults do
They're
that
hiding
too.
behind,
Adults. Yeah, well, and they learn from the best, and that's us.
Yeah.
Right? Like the adults in the world and not talking about things.
So are we the problem?
Maybe. I don't know. Well,
The four of us specifically. I hope
Could be.
not.
We're kind of trying to be the solution.
Yeah.
But I guess what I mean by saying is like are we doing enough now as adults and more aware? Like obviously you started an organization, so that's a big positive there, but it's like not only that is like what can an adult do today, whether it's a parent. Like I don't have kids, I like for me it's like right now there's no like, okay, I can tell my kid, like I can take away from this thing here and at supper tonight say something to my kids. Like, are we doing enough?
Well, even that last example though is important. Like at supper tonight, like how many families don't have supper together?
That's true.
Yeah.
So those opportunities to communicate with your young people, and I mean, I'm stealing your thunder because you're the therapist, and I work in spreadsheets, so what do I know? But communication is always work, whether you're a young person or whether you're an adult or you're in business or otherwise. So I think there's always more to do to keep those lines of communication open, in particular with parents and young people, and making sure that even if your kid doesn't want to talk to you right now, they still know that you're there to talk to, and they always have that outlet. And so, and maybe you're not the adult they want to talk to right now. Like Danielle referenced earlier, we always look at the amount of positive adult relationships that young people have, and we want to be able to fill that void for some young people. But maybe it's a family friend, maybe it's a coach, maybe it's a teacher. And making sure that young people have those positive adult role models in their life is vital. It's one of the 40 developmental assets that the Search Institute has created, and a lot of organizations locally use that model. And so they're vital to making sure that young people have the assets they need to be successful. So, and you can probably say all of that more intelligently than I just did.
But again, like even with the youth that we see, we have some that come for 1 session, 3 sessions. The average is what, like 8 or 10 sessions per youth. But then we have some that have been with us for several years, right? Because we are one of those positive adults, one of the 3 in their lives to help, their support network, or we are their support network. So really you can't really, I don't know, categorize or, think that maybe one particular type of student, youth, or what have you would be more apt to access services. It's really, there's no common, I think theme
the biggest
or whatever
feedback we get from our clients when we they fill out like self-evaluation forms kind of thing. And the biggest one we see is when we ask, what do you like best about coming to Atlantic Wellness? And they say to have someone to listen to me without judgment. And I think that is the common
100%.
thing between our clients, is that they just want to feel heard, and they want to feel like they can say what's on their mind and not get in trouble for it, or not be looked down on for having that thought.
We have grad students, interns that come every 8 months. We have 3 to 4 of them at a time, and that's part of how we are sustainable as a charity. But in the work that they do with the youth, they often ask me what if I'm not doing the work, or they don't seem to kind of open up or talk, or like what if they don't come back? And I always say, you're successful if they come back. Can you imagine? And I always say to them, like, when you're a youth back in the day and you had an adult that would meet with you weekly or bi-weekly and come and sit with you for an hour, put their phone down, and just pay attention to you and ask questions, and remember the name of your best friend, remember the name of your pet, your ex, about the conflict that you had with a teacher or whatever it might be, how important and valuable that is in somebody's life. And you might not feel like you're moving mountains and you're not like solving all the problems, but you're building a relationship with a youth, and that relationship and that rapport with them is invaluable.
And I agree 100% with that,
Yeah.
because I think one of the biggest things that I struggle with in the past is that I often didn't think anyone believed in me.
100%.
And I would always, because like I said, a kind of class clown, problem child, that stuff there. And I think it's part of like you're up, like when you're young and energetic and in like you have raw intelligence and you're active and stuff like that, is that you haven't like mastered those things yet. But often, because I would either get rewarded for certain things or punished for certain things, that's what became my mechanism of everything that I did. So sometimes it was fear of being punished, or sometimes it was trying to say something in order to get a reward, but there was never a believer. And I found like if you know, if it's the person hearing this that is an intern or stuff like that, is like, if I can give you the reassurance that just listening is the right thing, 100% agree, because I wish someone would have just been there for me like that, right? And maybe there was, and to your point with the male stigma around it, maybe it was also me not taking those opportunities and thinking everybody around me is out to get me, or they're my enemy or stuff like that. It's like, you have to take the first step, right? And that's sometimes the tougher part, I guess, right? So now, in terms of you know, things like, we've talked about accessibility in terms of this being free, right, which is amazing. Like, what strategies has the organization put in place in order for, you know, there's one thing saying it's free, but it's like, what's inspiring kids to, what do you think is inspiring kids to actually say, okay, well, I want to do it, right? Why this organization?
One of the big reasons is because they hear it from their friends.
Okay.
We have a huge word of mouth out there. Like, kids trust us because other kids trust us.
Right? Or
Right,
parents
like-
trust us because
Yeah.
they've talked to their friends that bring their kids here.
Right.
We're in the community a lot.
Okay.
We do presentations in schools. We do presentations at corporate offices, like a lunch and learn, kind of, you know, at the bank or wherever. Whoever will have us, we'll talk. But yeah, so I think just being out in the community too, they start to recognize us. We're familiar faces. Yeah, but I think really the biggest part is word of mouth.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've tried to make it as easy as possible for people to access services too.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the unique things about Atlantic Wellness is that we have broken down so many barriers, and people trust that when they come here, they're going to get the support that they need, because it's not always easy to navigate the system sometimes, and that can be fairly daunting. And so, you know, we have a clinic, for example, that we run that, you know, if you call in on a Monday morning, you get an appointment that week to see a therapist, and so you can start, you know, opening up right away. And so that things like that make our organization really accessible, and I think we've built a good reputation on that. So
Yeah, and we've had therapists like this. I'm not a therapist, so this always kind of blows my mind. I remember one time at the old office, one of you had a client that wouldn't come in the building. And so the therapist went out and sat in the car with her, and they did therapy out there. And I think another one here just couldn't say anything, so they sat in the same room and texted to each other, or in the other room and texted. Like, it's
whatever works, right?
yeah, whatever works. And you come in here and it's not scary,
Yeah.
you know.
Do you find, and I guess I'm not sure if it's something that we can actually talk about, or if it's even something that comes up, but I'm wondering about how much influence a parent has on the kid coming here. Like, do you find it's more voluntary, or it's more, I don't want to say forced, but I mean more like
we say
highly
mandated.
suggested?
We call them mandated clients, and just in the sense that it's someone else's idea for them to come to therapy, right? The kid hasn't bought into the idea yet, but for whatever reason, there's circumstances going on at home that a parent, a loved one, believes that it's a good idea for them to come and to talk to somebody. We have a large portion of kiddos that start out that way.
Fair.
But because we're relationship-based, client-centered work, we take our time. We don't have that cap, right? So we take our time building a relationship with them and selling them on the idea that this is good. We're a safe person for them to talk to, and we navigate how to work with the parent, but yet protect the confidentiality of the client. So, and that's always really helpful for them too.
How many parents do you then say, hey, maybe you should kind of start thinking about maybe being mandating them?
Yeah, mandating the parents. We don't do like traditional family therapy, but we do involve parents as much as we possibly can. Really, at the age of 16, you can consent for therapy on your own. But if there's a parent of a 17-year-old that's highly involved and is wanting to engage and participate and learn skills alongside their youth, we're going to support that, and we want to make sure that we can, transition the skills that we're doing in therapy to them, right? We only have them 1 hour a week. They have them for the rest of the time. Right. So, we want as much involvement as possible with them. Again, with giving the space that our client is our client. But at the same time, we may, make a recommendation that they seek out their own support, or maybe they want to go to family therapy. And then sometimes we don't have access to those parents, and like those are some of those kiddos that we have with us more long term, that we are kind of that positive adult.
Okay.
Yep.
I mean, on the organizational side, like how obviously at the end of the day, there are success metrics in order to keep this business running, and you get funding from, private donors, and there's obviously involvement from the province in terms of the funding, right? Yeah. How collaborative have you found other organizations or even the government in terms of your success?
Well, partnerships are vital to what we do, and we're very fortunate to be in a community that is very giving and philanthropic, and so our doors are able to stay open because we have great partners, and the Elmwood Group is a great example of that. I mean, convenient that we're doing this. I guess I can shout it out, but you guys made a great contribution to a campaign that we ran and wrapped up last year. The years are all running together at this point. I don't know.
Yes, last year.
Time's just like
that. And a portion of those funds help pay for our new office. Yep. And so, because of campaigns like that, and because of the fact that people are giving to organizations like ours, we were able to add bilingual services. So we now have we can now provide French language counseling here as well. We've been able to expand our internship program over the last couple of years. We've expanded our clinic hours, and so we're able to do more to help the community because of the role our partners play. So the province is on board. In terms of specific funding strategies, that's a great question for you, I think, because that's kind of your wheelhouse. So I'll put you on the spot, maybe.
Well, it's just like he said, we have great partners. Living in Moncton, maybe it's like this everywhere, I don't know, but people are so generous here. And we've, people always say to me, oh, you have to raise money to keep the place open. That must be a really hard job. And I always say, well, not really, because we're such a great organization. Like we provide vital services to young people who are struggling, and who doesn't want to support that?
I agree.
And thankfully she doesn't think it's a hard job. None of the rest of us could do it. So.
No, my gosh, no.
But I mean, Julie's done a lot of work over the last years, or a couple of years, to revamp our fund development strategy, because as the organization continues to expand, we need to, it's more than just running a couple of events a year to raise funds. We have individual donors, we have people that give to us on a monthly basis. Julie's brought in great new corporate partners, we get grants. We are working with the province now to get a little bit more funding than we've had in the past, and so could still use more. So if the province is listening,
let me get out my checkbook.
there you go. So it's really important that we have those funding partners, and the other side of that is the great service partners that we have in the community, because we work in a great network of other nonprofit organizations where we can partner together. So a great example of that, we have a counselor on staff who does outreach therapy.
Okay.
And so we work with another local nonprofit, Youth Quest, or
okay,
Youth
yeah,
Impact.
yeah.
Youth Quest is a
Done
program
a
they
few
have.
barbecues there. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
This is a great spot for barbecues if you're interested in the future too. Just throwing that out there.
Deal.
We have a
Doesn't
really
have to be
big
a
parking
fundraiser.
lot.
We'll just be, yeah. But you know, we're able to collaborate with them and go out and partnering together, we can meet the needs of young people in the community. And so there's strength in numbers, and when we can pool our resources together, we're able to really address the needs of the folks who need it most in the community. And so whether it's United Way that we're partnering with or Youth Quest, there's a real strength in the network of nonprofit organizations and community organizations that work together. And I think that's one of the benefits of community mental health. Is that approach and that ability for our team to be able to provide wraparound support and provide that holistic approach to supporting our clients. So when we need to connect them with another program or another service or help them figure out where to go when they're aging out of Atlantic Wellness, there's a lot of support for that. So
now, I guess this segues into a really good question that I'm interested in, and it's more so like, are you just adding to what's available, or are you fitting a hole that's been left vacant that should have been taken care of in the first place?
Oh, that's loaded. That's a good question.
Well, and I mean, because I'm looking at it from the perspective where, like, you know, I feel there's a responsibility for the government to obviously take care of health services. And I do understand that, you know, the taxes are allocated in a specific way, and there are many different things that they need to be allocated to. But I feel as though if people are not alive, then where are we going to spend the taxes in the first place, right?
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
So I feel that's the first place you start. So when I see organizations like this, I'm like, more power to you. Do everything you can. We will continue to support it. But I'm just, you know, you're always looking at it from maybe another more like a curious way of like, where's the money going, I guess?
I think there's a lot to that. I think when you know better, you do better.
Right.
I think whether it's the government or society, the more we learn about mental health, the more we need to adapt. And I think Atlantic Wellness was created as we were adapting to the needs in the community. And so Judge Mike McKee had written a report on mental health in the province that outlined a number of different recommendations. And Atlantic Wellness was created as a response to that report. And so we're continuously adapting. It's why we continue to change our services so that we can constantly try and stay ahead of the curve and that we can be, we like to be a leader in the community when it comes to youth mental health to try and keep up with what those needs are. I think there's definitely, because of the severity and the huge demand increase for services, there's a lot of focus on crisis situations in the formal systems, in government systems. And so I think Atlantic Wellness can play a unique role in that some youth who might fall through the cracks in those systems, if they're not, we look at mental health often in terms of various tiers. So tier 1 would be like a prevention, and then tier 3 and 4 are more complex crisis situations. And so a lot of young people who might be getting formalized services through government might be looking at crisis situations or complex cases. And so if their resources are all going to things like that, I'm not saying in all cases that's the way it is, but if that's where the bulk of their resources are going, where are the tier 1 and tier 2 kids going to go?
Right.
There's a gap that they're falling through, and that's where the strength of Atlantic Wellness can step up, and we can catch those kids. But we do that in partnership with the government because we know where some of those gaps are, so we're able to work very collaboratively with the child and youth teams, with the Department of Health, Department of Social Development, and we're able to really look at what those gaps are, and that's why we can tailor our services. So now I will say Atlantic Wellness goes across that spectrum, and we go tier 1 to tier 4. We see everybody, and that's I guess just another feather in the cap of the way we operate.
And we have the advantage of not having so much red tape. So when there's a service that's missing in the province, we can fill it a lot faster than the government can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
can be just a quick staff meeting and
Well, yeah,
get
we've been
that done, right?
grassroots from the very, very beginning, right? And although we've grown up and it's been 12 years and we've moved 3 times and we've gotten bigger and expanded and our yearly budget is much larger than it ever was, we're still very much grassroots, at the core of it. So again, yeah, for us to have put together the clinic and just been able to do that during COVID, and we were able to literally go to a telehealth from home in a day.
Okay.
Right? Where it took other places
Yeah.
a lot longer to kind of turn that around. We literally had a staff meeting, went home and turned on our computers the next day and we're seeing all our kids. There was no interruption in services. So,
There you go.
yeah.
Now we talk about these tiers and stuff like that, and these I think are coming in a situation, maybe not the tier 1s and 2s, but the 3s. If you're a situation of crisis, this is we need to save someone, right? Mm-hmm. How is an organization like yourselves, and even maybe from the ground level, a parent or a person like myself that may come across a kid in maybe volunteering or stuff like that, how can we start the preventative measures, I guess? Are there things that you guys put in place already, or are there things that even someone could be listening at this and say hey, this is a way that I can maybe start helping people around me? Does that make sense?
I think it's letting them know about Atlantic Wellness.
Okay.
And get, like Andrew had mentioned, our clinic, we have new appointments every week, right? So again, it's informing them that there is support out there and that there's help. And sometimes that happens, that somebody will call us from the community and just to talk to us about whatever situation might be happening for them. And they may not actually have the youth with them or have the opportunity to bring them in or what have you, and we could kind of guide them through that a little bit, right? So. Yeah.
I think sometimes people are building protective factors around youth and working at that prevention level, and they don't even realize it. If we look at a lot of organizations like a Boys and Girls Club or a YMCA and the programming that they're offering for young people, they're learning valuable skills, they're building those healthy adult relationships. And we don't necessarily look at that from a mental health lens, but those are a lot of foundational building blocks that young people need. And so it's great when those organizations are also tapped into Atlantic Wellness, because when the kids that they're working with need us, we're also there to be able to support them, and they can make that referral really easily. But they're doing really good work too to build up a lot of those assets that young people need, and we don't always think about that. So even something as simple as making sure you're checking in with your teenager every day or your young kid and asking how their day was and getting them to talk to you about that. Those things
tough conversation.
Yeah.
I remember I had a conversation with my parents over Christmas, kind of a more heart to heart, and it was you were really difficult in your young age to just kind of get through to you, and you think back and you're yeah, no, you're right. And it's it's tough, right? And and I think we looking back at it, I think any teenager probably doesn't come from they'll learn why they did it in a certain way. I thought to be quite honest, it's you get into that stage where you're okay, stop babying me, and you're oh, okay, it's not cool that you're doing this. Yeah. But it becomes almost just a little rude, and I think that's the point where I apologize to my parents for that 20 odd years later, but still it's you just
better late than never, right?
Hindsight, right?
Yeah.
So
I think too, as adults, not to internalize what the youth is kind of how they may be reacting to you, kind of trying to connect, right? Yeah. Connection is everything. Yeah. Connection and communication. I often will tell parents, I have friends that will reach out and be should I take my kid to counseling? I'm take them for a drive first, grab them a Starbucks, take them for a drive and just have a chat. Really, the best place to have conversations with the youth is in the car.
Okay.
You're not looking at them directly and you're not having eye contact. You're side by side and you're just chatting, right? Just be available. Once in a while when they're in the same space as you, if that ever happens with a teenager and you're in the same space as, put your phone down. Just, say hi. Make it, seen that you're available. Yeah. They may not talk to you and that's okay, but they're noticing. Yeah. We're just all about, I often talk to the staff about this too, is we're planting seeds. That's all we're doing. You may never, ever have the opportunity to see that blossom, but just plant the seed that you're available. One day they may call you. True. They'll remember, that person paid attention to me, that coach asked me, that other parent, I've got teenagers at home. When the other kids are in my house, I know their name. I say hi. I take a minute just to, hey, so-and-so, whatever. How's it going? Just pay attention.
And do you see their body language change
Oh,
over
yeah.
time?
Yeah.
That's a nice
Yeah.
part, right?
Yeah. Or you'll see them walking in a group and they'll look back and they'll just smile and be like,
Nice.
yeah, once you'll see one in the group, right? That,
Yeah.
that meant something to them, or for whatever, that period of time in their life that they needed just that extra support, or someone had their back if they needed it. Yeah.
What would you say, and it's obviously difficult because we aren't in those stages anymore, what do you think makes it difficult, especially in those ages from the inside? What do you think is the things that they're most struggling with as an individual?
Eyes turn to Danielle to answer that question.
I think so.
I feel it's like an opinionated question, right? Because
Yeah.
For my biggest issue was I grew up as an only child, so for me it was being abandoned, right? Because it was like I often look back at it and I'm like, okay, now I kind of understand why people have like a brother and sister, because then you can like, if they do something wrong, then you see them getting punished, so then you don't need to do that. But when you're an only child, you're the center of attention. And so you're the one getting punished. And often when you get punished is like the classic way is just be sent to your room. So it's like that abandoning mechanism shows up there. And me, it turned into people pleasing.
Yeah.
And so what happened from there is it's trying to fit in and trying to be a part of something. And sometimes it developed into more toxic behavior where it's like, you start doing things because other people are doing it because you just don't want to be left alone, right?
Yeah.
And then one day you have to realize that, a lot of that unhappiness or the things that you're not doing correctly are just because you haven't given yourself the attention of figuring out what you want, right? So for me, that was really...
You nailed it. I think the biggest thing is a sense of belonging.
Yeah,
I think
trying
that
to figure out where they fit in
where
the
you
world,
fit,
in
who,
your
who
family,
you are, and where you fit. I think those go together, and I think that's the biggest thing. And I think it's always has been, and will continue to be. Right? It's just this idea of like, where do I fit in this world, in this school, in this group, in my home? What's my role? Yeah.
And it's tough, I look more in my personal experience as easier to look back at my 20s and see things that I could have done differently or not done versus in my, from 10 to 20, because I'm like, I don't think I could have done it differently, right?
No.
And because you're so, you don't even know yet what you're interested in. Like, in my 20s or 30s, I can be like, maybe I shouldn't have done that, and I know that I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
But from 10 to 20, it's like, a lot of the things are very minuscule as well, but they kind of all add up, and then you're like, oh, okay, that's why this happened, or why, right? But, sometimes you carry a lot of those minuscule, the first heartbreak and things like that. You carry it, you're like 30, 40, you're like, I still haven't gotten over that yet, right? It adds up, right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, the teenage brain isn't fully developed until it's 25.
Okay.
Right? So as a youth, you don't have the ability to have insight the way that you do when you're 20 and when you're 30, right? To kind of look back and have reflection and have the insight of why you did what you did or how you felt, right? Mm-hmm. And again, for teenagers too, they're very much in the moment. That's why TikTok, social media is all very, it's instant gratification. The ability to kind of zoom out and to reflect and to look at long-term consequences. It's not that they don't want to. A lot of times we think as adults is like they don't want to. They can't. Their brains are not fully developed. They're not able to. That part is still under construction. So for them to be able to kind of think about, I'm going to do this, and this is going to impact somebody in this way, and this I'm going to regret when I'm 30, that's not even there. That ability to do that, right? That's why sometimes when we look at some of the decisions our kids make, we're like, what are you doing?
True.
Every day.
That is going to mess you up, long term. Why would you make that decision? And they're like, well, I don't know. They really don't know. Yeah. They really don't know. And that's why I find youth and parents have such a hard time. Because as parents, we're big picture people. We're looking at every decision they make under a microscope of oh gosh, if they don't pass this math test, they're not going to graduate and they're not going to go to the university that they had planned to, and they're not going to get the career, right? And they're just like, I'll do a retest. Yeah. Not a big deal. What's the problem, right? And that's where conflict builds. It's just brains are different.
And am I wrong in saying that also part of this might be that the parents maybe don't know how to approach those situations? Because I feel like you're coming to a really great point is that like, and again, can't speak as a parent, but I feel as though like I'm maybe right, maybe wrong about this, but it's like when something happens like, oh, they didn't study and they're going to fail their math test, they're going to say like, if you don't study, you're going to fail their math test. And the kid doesn't really internalize that situation and the result. They're just telling their parents like, screw my parents. Like, why are they telling me to do that? Because they're just telling them what they should do. They're taking on that responsibility for them.
Right.
But they're not having a conversation about being like, listen, like what's making you uncomfortable about why don't you want to do your homework, right?
Yeah.
And I feel maybe that's it. Could I say it's like either not knowing how to approach that conversation, or could it be laziness, or just irritated, not wanting to deal with it, like I don't know, like.
Well, before, remember we talked about a little bit about how we're all human beings with our own stories and we're all reacting to each other. That's what that is, right? Parents are reacting out of fear for their kid because of whatever their lived experience is, right? They haven't done the work maybe, or they are tired, or maybe they're stressed with something else and they're just reactive as opposed to responding to a situation and not really like hitting that pause button and being like, okay, listen, Johnny, like what's going on? You know, what's getting in the way of you studying for this test? How can I help you? How can I support you? Whatever, instead of, if you don't do this, you're going to fail. That's mom's fear that he's not doing what he needs to be doing and he's going to fail and he's going to live with me for the rest of my life. Right? Like you see how that goes, right?
Yeah.
Because
parents, and you're not wrong.
No, right. You're not wrong. But that, again, that type of approach is not going to encourage Johnny to be like, you're right, Mom, let me just go study, because, you know, it's only going to shame him to be like, oh, I did it again, or I disappointed my parent, or I don't care. I'm not going to do it. You're going to have a different response than what you're looking for. It's reaction against reaction.
It's tough for parents to learn techniques too. Like
oh my gosh, I'm a parent, and like, yeah, it's hard.
Well, yeah, and when we both spent our careers working with young people.
Yeah.
I worked frontline with young people for over 15 years, and you know, I did training with my team on like how do you effectively navigate these conversations and ask open-ended questions. And as soon as I had a kid, it's like everything's gone. It's like the world's gonna end. I forgot everything I knew about how to talk to young people, and I'm just panicking the whole time that I'm gonna
because
ruin
there's
their
emotion
life.
there, right?
100%.
Yeah.
And so it's, you know, it's okay to not have the answers sometimes.
It's probably
of
easier if
course.
it's not your kid.
No, and my biggest piece about it, like the lesson that I talk to a lot of parents about, is that you're going to have ruptures in your relationships with your kids. That's totally common, and it's to be expected. Mm-hmm. It's how you repair them that makes the difference, right? Apologize to your kids. If you lose it, if you screw up, if you say it wrong, take responsibility. That's modeling, right? And that's showing proper communication and relationships, right? That's where we can start. Is talking to your kids and going back and be like, holy, I'm sorry, I lost it there. Mm-hmm. I was sitting back in my grade 10 class failing that test. That's how I reacted to you, right? Like I had some fears about not passing too, and I gave that to you, and that's not fair. I'm sorry. Your kid's going to be like, whatever, and be like, that's okay. Just all you did was you planted a seed. They'll think about that later, right? They'll remember.
And it's funny, my dad told me a story about the first time that he feared that he was going to get a very bad punishment from his father, and remembers vividly that was the first time that he had ever been addressed in a state of his dad understanding and making it relatable to a situation that he went, and that's where their relationship changed for the better, right? Because it was a situation where it was like, I expect that I'm going to be punished. Yeah. And it's going to be like, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, go to your room, blah, blah, blah. But it was like, listen, I understand where you're coming from. I was also your age at that time. Let me give you a piece of advice. And I'm not going to mention what the piece of advice was because it's kind of like, whatever. But I feel like it brought the relationship together where it was like, oh, okay, he gets me. And so from that point there, that connection there, that's when you can start listening, right? And so when some of that maybe, you know, hopefully doesn't come from an emotional state of like an angry emotion or something like that. It's more so like, hey, you really shouldn't do this, and they'll listen, just because you've made that connection, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Do you address the same, like, do you give the same coping mechanisms to youth did you would to adults? Like, for instance, like, something like journaling or meditating or stuff like that. Are they very similar?
Yeah, we just present it in a different package.
Like, can you give me an example?
TikTok. No, I'm just kidding. I had to say it again.
Full circle.
Full circle. And now the positive side of TikTok. Yeah. We asked, no. I just package it a little bit differently. I think I have some youth that we work with, if you bring up any breathing exercises, they're like, oh. You're the third therapist that's told me to do that. We just talk about it differently. Like, hey, do you like singing? Okay, cool. Okay. Let's sing. Do you know singing is breathing? Okay, that'll do the same thing. That'll regulate, right? So, yeah, but it's all the same. It's all the same strategies. It's just using them differently with them.
Is there some that you find that they are more receptive than others? Like when they're like, oh, I'll do that. Like,
that's a good question. TikTok. No, just whatever they see on TikTok.
Yeah, the one that I've found the most difficult to get through to, but has been the most beneficial, is actually journaling.
Yeah.
And I found that one has been like, I've always enjoyed writing, and I find like for me in marketing purposes, I find the writing has been the one that I've enjoyed most and that I can communicate best. But I've never thought like, hey, maybe I should put my emotions on paper and just because in a certain way I don't know if it feels stupid is the right connotation for it, but I feel it's like, and only once I started doing it that I realized it's actually not stupid at all. It's like it clears your mind, it processes your thought and all that, but you feel as though like I'm already talking to myself inside my head. Yeah. Why would I be putting it on paper? Yeah. And then you start doing it and you're like, oh, now it's not in my head anymore, and I can just read it again.
Yeah, yeah. Right? I find a lot of youth will appreciate journaling, and whether that's like bullet journaling or we call them brain dumps or different ways of kind of doing it. Other kids, they're resistant to it because for them that ability to kind of put what they're thinking onto paper, there's a blockage there. They're having a hard time with that. Some really like quick kind of ones that they really like is like the cold water one, right? So cold water will reset your nervous system like that. So
like cold plunges?
Yeah, well, it's either cold plunges, and that's new now.
Our marketing coordinator is huge into cold plunges.
There's actually a thing called dive reflex.
Okay.
And if you look it up on YouTube, you can actually watch some pretty cool videos where people will wear like a heart monitor. Okay. And you do like your face in a bowl of ice water, and your heart rate will actually drop instantly. And it helps regulate your nervous system. So, but you don't always have access to a bowl of cold water in the middle of class or wherever you might be, right? But like sipping on cold water, holding an ice cube, running your hands under cold water, like excusing yourself from class and just running your hands under cold water or putting it on your face will actually reset your nervous system. So kids like ones like that they can actually do. Eating a sour candy can actually stop a panic attack in its tracks. Yeah. Huh. Yeah. So, or like cinnamon, like something really strong in your mouth. So keeping warheads in your, like bring your warhead candies in your backpack. Sometimes they'll use those in class. Chewing peppermint gum. Those are all like things that like more tangible things that they can do that really kind of don't set them like apart from others, right? They can do it with no one knowing.
What I took from that is I can eat more candy.
You kind of lit up when I said candy, and I was like, okay, more candy.
I'm learning. There we go.
Yeah.
Sour candies in everyone's office.
Yeah. You learn one thing every day, so there you go.
That's it.
Sour candies work really, really well.
Now, obviously, youth are at school most of the time, which is a big part. How involved are you with the school system? Like, are you heavily, are you in school, or like, is there a representative that's there, or is it like there's a liaison? Like, how does that work?
We work really closely with the school district, and we build great relationships with the individual schools. So the district runs a mental health summit and symposium every year, and we're a part of that planning team, and we help with that. We do presentations in schools all throughout the year. So teachers or guidance counselors or anyone in the school can request that we come in, and we've done presentations on stress and anxiety and social media safety and building healthy relationships. And so we have great connections that way. We're not doing any direct clinical work in the schools. We're not able to do that, but we do have great working relationships with them. And so we're fortunate because that's where kids are, and that's where we're able to build some of that trust and build those relationships directly with young people and their support network. So,
I would suspect that a good place to start the conversation on how things are evolving or what like has been changing or whatnot. Do you have a lot of conversation with the teachers? Like obviously they're like sponge of like, oh, we're seeing more of this or more of that. There's more bullying or kids are in more relationships, or because you think about all these like common problems where people face trauma or pain or stuff like that. Like
the clinical team probably would.
I think we do, like, indirectly as well. Like, so one, because we're part of like the youth summit and the youth symposium, there's often teachers in those discussions and giving us information, and we're part of U-Turns, which is a collective of all of the not-for-profit community partners plus the school district, and they come and share information too, so that we can kind of keep a pulse on kind of what's happening and what's trending in the schools. But as well too, when we work with youth, if ever there's an opportunity to connect with a teacher, a guidance, the principal, whoever, to kind of build that support network. We wouldn't do it with all of our clients because it's not necessary, but for some it is, right? So if we're working with a client who's, 13 years old and we're teaching him some strategies around anxiety in the classroom, once we have his consent and the family's consent, we'll reach out to the school. Can we meet with the teacher? Can we meet with the guidance counselor? Sometimes we'll go and have the whole school meeting, and we'll go and we'll just advocate for the youth, but we'll also share what we're doing in session, right? So how do we kind of bridge what we're doing here in the community, at home and at school?
Nice.
Yeah.
Now, before I have one last question before we just this last subject here. The Atlantic Wellness obviously wants to continue to grow. Are there, we got involved with one of the campaigns. Are there any upcoming campaigns that people should know about, or any other opportunities to support? Your opportunity to plug that in here.
Well, we will be running a campaign in probably April to see if we can get monthly donors.
Okay.
Monthly donations are great because it's revenue that we can rely on.
Right.
It's super easy for both the donor and for us. So we'll be doing that. We're going to run a bit of an awareness campaign, which is just about Atlantic Wellness in general and how we're different from everyone else.
Yeah. That's a great place to start.
Yeah. And we'll have a couple of events coming up, but they're not quite in the books yet, so stay tuned.
Yeah, we get the sneak peek there. So one final thing, and we did a small little video on the Bell Let's Talk Day on this, and I think it's a good question, especially that we've been talking about youth all this time. If each one of you want to share, what advice would you give your younger self?
Oh boy. That's I don't know. I guess I would maybe tell myself or encourage myself to be a little more confident and not be afraid to try new things a little earlier on. When I was in high school, when I got to about grade 10, maybe end of grade 10, I guess, I started getting involved in, shout out to the Royals in Riverview, I started getting involved in coffee houses, in theater, and that stuff really started to boost my confidence. But it was midway through high school before I did that, and I would probably encourage myself to, because I was a fairly shy student, and I struggled to make friends, and so that I guess I would encourage myself to do that.
Oof. Yeah, I think confidence is probably a big one. I don't know how I would say it as a kid, just that you're worthwhile, and like we have there, you are enough. You don't need to be somebody different. You can be yourself, and you'll find your people and just have more confidence.
And you will. It's tough. I've heard on a recent podcast which really enlightened me on the aspect of creating a definition for confidence, and I think a lot of times it comes from a place of thinking that you need to believe in yourself, and often believing in yourself is clouded by whichever direction that you're looking towards. Like, and a lot of people might look towards their past traumas, their past experiences, all the reasons why they shouldn't believe in themselves. But in reality, confidence is really looking at life as like a teeter-totter and being like, if 51% of this tells me that I should be doing it, I should try. So it's more of a willingness to try, right? And listen, you will get better if you just try. And I think a lot of people stop and you're saying like, maybe I should have be like, coming from a place where maybe I should have tried something. Maybe I should have been more interested in just taking that step forward. It's like, we all rode a bike for the first time and maybe fell off of it and all that, but did we get back up? Are we here today? And I think it starts from a place of, I don't believe that I can ride the bike today, but am I willing to get on it, right? So
yeah. Mine would be to my younger self, I would say to reach out, to talk, to connect to the, to the adults and the people.
I changed my mind. I'm going.
Yeah. I internalized a lot of it. I, kept a lot of it to myself, and I struggled. I really, really struggled. And it came out of my behavior, right? But nobody really knew why I was behaving in the way that I was, right? And I didn't reach out. I didn't tell anybody. So.
I guess I'll go last. I mean, for me, I think, again, I talked about the people pleasing and all that. I think it's like, you're not going to find value in other people. You're only going to find it within yourself. And I think that's something that I struggle with is like, if you're always trying to externalize your sense of worth and all of that, is that goalposts can shift at any time. People's emotions can change, if people can move and all of that. And I struggled a lot of times with that in figuring out like, what do I want? Right? And it was never from a place of like not being able to figure those things out. Is just, I wanted to make sure that if I figured it out, there were people there to congratulate me or to appreciate me and all that. When in reality, I just need to appreciate myself. And I feel like if I would have figured that out, like, I mean, I'm still here, so that's the good part. But that's a lesson you learn now. So hopefully someone takes something out of it.
It's a good point though. Like insecurity can be really crippling too, because as much as I would tell myself to be more confident, like I was involved in things. Like I've always been involved in music and things like that. And so there were people around me, and sometimes that insecurity might have been blinding as to the people who were there and, willing to support, and you don't necessarily see that. Because you're letting your judgment be clouded or whatever it is. So it's a fair point.
Well, I thank you all very, very much. It's been an exceptional conversation, one that obviously we've put ourselves out there and talked about some really important stuff. And for anyone watching this, obviously we're big supporters of Atlantic Wellness, and I would say from a place of honest truth is that it is a great organization to support. So in any opportunity that you have to support them, I would say your money is very well spent there. Spending is the right way to say it, but I think it's a great place to donate, and I think that it is it's always been something important, but now that it's more talked about, I think it's all the more reasons to start supporting those. It's like it's a no-brainer, right? So.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
We appreciate
Thanks for having us.
the conversation.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a wrap.
There we go.